You are now listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
Groovy. No more room in hell. The dead will walk here.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Great Scott, keep away!
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me today will be Sean.
Hello.
And that'll be it because once again, Derek has had internet connectivity issues. And the movie we were watching this week will be Cemetery Man. And that is a movie where there's relatively limited availability of it. It's not something that's on Netflix or you can't rent it from Google Play. Or I think Derek usually rents stuff through the whatever the Microsoft video store is with the Xbox.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And it wasn't available via any of those.
Yeah, I always do Vudu, not on there. It seems like the American rights for this are probably either held up by somebody that aren't doing anything with it or just nobody wants it.
Well, and two, the copy that we all watched, not the best quality transfers available of this movie at the moment. There's not a lot of is there even a Blu-ray of this that exists?
Yes, there is.
Is it available in the U.S.?
No, it is not. You may be able to find a 720p version online places.
Yeah, let's see. Cemetery Man Blu-ray Japanese.
Yeah,
compatible with U.S. players, $75.
I mean, yeah, if they had an American Blu-ray release of this, I would definitely throw down the money for it because this isn't a lot of these horror films that I've bought at least one DVD copy and then a Blu-ray copy. You know, when it comes to Evil Dead and Army of Darkness, I have 4 DVD copies of those and at least 2 Blu-ray copies. So, I don't own a copy of this, so.
Yes,
wish somebody would do something with it.
We were just passing around a digital copy that we had because Corey actually had the DVD, and this was previously something that was included in a video that he had done that was the top 5 underrated foreign zombie films. And so you can go watch that list. We'll put it in the show notes, but that was where we got the copy of the movie from because he actually has it. We just had digital copies and some issues with those, but... and then the plan is for us to do more of these podcasts, record them in person, to have a video piece to go along with it if we post it to YouTube, and we don't have to worry about internet issues. But we're going to try to do more of those in the future so we don't have to worry about the internet bringing us down.
The limited availability, that's what kind of held us up this week. We planned on kind of doing that Sunday, but did not work out.
Yeah, because I had watched it earlier in the week, and then I'd given Derek a copy, and I thought that he was good to go, and then it didn't work. So then I had to do some re-encoding and making a new copy of it, and then it worked, but then the audio got all out of whack. So he did not get to watch that movie all the way through.
Which is a shame, because I wanted him to see this movie. Yeah,
so maybe we'll have to just... use the DVD and make our way watch it in person once or something.
Yeah.
Because, that's the issue with some of these movies that aren't exactly widely available is just how do you get them in front of people at a reasonable price? And like we said, you can't really rent it anywhere. I mean, and I don't really recommend pirating anything. I just wish there was a good way to get a hold of this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I don't recommend pirating anything either, but and I'm not saying you should, but it's almost to a point where, the availability is just not there for it. You can't buy new copies of this anywhere.
Yeah, hopefully.
It's definitely still not legal, and I normally never condone doing that, but it's one of those issues where it's people should see this film, Yeah,
I mean, with a lot of these movies, I'm sure there's rights issues that get tangled up, but if it was available anywhere, then that's how we would have handled it, But we'll get back to Cemetery Man for the main review. But before that, we're going to discuss some news and things we've been watching. And in news, there's a few things that have come up recently. Some of them, the new Doom was released this past week.
Yeah,
and none of us had a chance to play it. But
I'm very excited for that. I really liked all the previews I saw. People were down on that multiplayer beta, so I was kind of apprehensive. I was thinking I don't really have the money for it because I don't know. I think I brought it up before, but kind of started a video production company with my wife, and so all of our money's going into that, and I quit my other job, so it's not really the thing to be jumping into is buying $60 games right now. Yeah. But I was so wanting to cover that just because it looks like a really interesting version of Hell. And then that multiplayer beta people were kind of down on, but then the single player, people suspected that it was not going to be good because they were holding reviews until Friday when it came out, on Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
And they kept saying, it was because we got to have the servers live and Snap Map. We want people to review the entire package as one. And so they kind of thought, that's just an excuse. But really, everything I've heard, the single player is like phenomenal.
Well, and two, it sounds like it's a lot of what you would expect from a Doom single player game, like updated enough to, have some modern touches. I think there's like armor and weapon upgrades and things like that.
Yeah, a bunch of melees and stuff, melee attacks.
But then a lot of, the classic Twitch-based, super fast gameplay you're used to from those older style games. So
yeah, I do have to say I was watching a little bit of gameplay on from Giant Bomb, and the old Doom, you would kind of clear an area and then run around, look for a key card or something like that, and there was that in there, but for me, the areas I saw, I was almost wanting more action out of it because there would be like a little group of people they would kill, and then they would kind of run around for a while, and no enemies were like spawning or anything like that. I mean, everybody's been saying it's great, but I kept kind of clicking through wanting to see more action because the action, it looks great in there, the melee combat and the weapons and everything, and just the art design of the characters and the world. So yeah, even people that aren't in the games much, they may have appreciate some of the art design and their representation of Hell.
Yeah, so at some point, I'm sure one of us will play that, but when we do, we'll report back. Let's see. So other things that were in the news, Insidious 4, they've announced the release date and who's going to be directing and writing. And it'll be hitting theaters on October 20th, 2017. It'll be written by Lee Winnell again. And the director will be Adam Robitel, who directed The Taking of Deborah Logan. And I think this will be another prequel. I don't think this will be a sequel to Insidious 2 because Lynn Shay is back.
Yeah.
And like the numbering of these types of movies might get a little bit confusing to people if they have these later numbered sequels that take place prior to the first film. But it's kind of like Fast and the Furious. People don't realize this a lot of times or think about it because they never really gave you much reason to. But in that movie, I think 4, 5, and 6 are prequels to Tokyo Drift, which was part 3, because of the way that they laid out the timeline. So I think if you start doing that with these movies, like, I don't think they've given much of a outline of exactly what this movie's story will be, but I would assume it's a prequel, unless they do a sequel, but an actual sequel to the second film.
So, spoiler alert for Insidious. Did she die at the end of 2?
She died at the end of 1.
Okay, I don't remember that.
And then she was in the ghost realm in part 2.
Well, that's what I was about to say. She could have a heavily role. You know what I mean? They
in
kind
the
of
further or whatever it's called.
Yeah, they could kind of flip that or even bring her back out and do some crazy stuff if they wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, because they kind of hinted at that in the second one,
mm-hmm.
and it would be, like I said, it would be interesting if they do another prequel. Like you have 2 sequels that are prequels. That I don't know that there's too many series that have done that. Aside, from something like Star Wars, we do a prequel trilogy, but. We all enjoyed the third one, so
I'm cautiously optimistic about this because of the third one's how that one turned out. So we're willing to give this one a chance.
We'll have to see how that comes together when they get a little bit more details announced on it, on possible plots or things like that. Other news: Fox, their Exorcist TV series, they released some promos for it, and they have a promo video that shows some stuff from the show, and it's got Gina Davis is one of the lead characters. And when I first heard about this show, I was a little bit, I wouldn't say optimistic. I was just, kind of like, well, I guess a TV show would probably work better than another, like a remake attempt.
Yeah.
Because they have, more room to do more of an in-depth story. And, the original movie is pretty long, so you can stretch that out. I don't know how many episodes, because like the main problem I have with a lot of like network TV is when you have these like 22 episode seasons, and you see a lot of stretching to achieve those numbers. I don't know if it said how many episodes this show is going to have.
Well, it could be, about The Exorcist, maybe somebody that there's many exorcisms throughout, and there's maybe an overarching story that, they're dealing with some other issues or something.
Well, this looks like it's going to be mostly about one family. So
they only have one location to basically be in.
But two, like, Fox has had some success with their genre programming because they also have Sleepy Hollow, which is I've never watched, but I know some people enjoy it. Of course, they brought the X-Files back. And then their other genre shows they have was Wayward Pines. Was that on Fox? Because that was the M. Night.
I can't remember.
Let me look that up real quick.
The Twin Peaks-ish.
Yeah, it was on Fox. So they've had some genre content that has done well. So out of all the networks, I think Fox is probably better prepared to make that show successful than someone like ABC, or it seems like the other network that would probably go to is like the CW or something.
Yes,
more like a Supernatural or one of those series. But so we'll have to see for more to come out. Like I said, I'm not really excited for the show, but it's supposed to debut this fall, so I'm sure they'll get more stuff out there about it, and then hopefully they'll get some people get to watch the pilot and get some thoughts out there, so we kind of know if it's going to be good or bad. But
hey, when's that Twin Peaks show coming back? Is that in early 2017 now? That got pushed back, right?
Twin Peaks,
yeah,
still kind of undefined. Because I heard, like, I'd seen rumors too when they were shooting that they didn't just shoot like one season; they shot like 2 seasons of material.
Oh, sweet. Well, I mean,
that's all just rumors.
The cast list is big enough for 2 seasons, actually.
The cast list is so huge. Like, it'd be funny if it's just like they have a dream and all those people are in the audience, and that's how all those cast members are there. But
yeah, well, I saw a story that David Bowie was supposed to return as well.
Yeah, I saw that.
They're done shooting now, right?
Yeah, they had tweeted or posted from the Facebook page that they were done shooting the day they posted the cast list. And some of it's, a ton of people, and it'll be interesting to see how all that works. But
yeah, I was actually just listening to a podcast. Since we do some filmmaking, William and I, and we're working on a project now for the site and did 48 last year. It's for the American Cinematographer podcast. And they talked to Ron Garcia, and he DP'd the pilot episode of Twin Peaks, and then Fire Walk with Me. And he tells a lot of different stories about kind of the process, and he had no idea what he was making. Like, first he thought the script was dumb when he read it, and it was actually much different than the final product that they made. And he just had no clue. And David's not very clear when directing. He just kind of speaks in very specific, but almost, I'm trying to think, maybe some in symbolic ways instead of literal, to kind of give you a feel of what you're supposed to be doing instead of giving you specific instructions. And he loved working with him, and he very much felt like, he said he's definitely an artist and really, really respects him. But he said after doing that pilot, he got asked to do the whole season, and he was like, no, because they spent like 20 hours in the, I guess the White Lodge or the Red Room. So he was like, he could already see how the season was going to go, possibly with the work that was going to have to go into it. So he dropped out, but I guess he came back for the movie, which the movie looks phenomenal too. And I mean, he kind of set the tone with Lynch for the pilot season. But that's the American Cinematographer podcast, and it's an awesome interview with him. So I recommend checking that out if you like Twin Peaks, and just not if you're not only into cinematography or filmmaking.
Yeah, because Twin Peaks is actually something I'm quite excited to have come back. Like The Exorcist, like, it's just an adaptation of a property without really any of the original people involved. So, like, we'll see what's going to happen with that. But with Twin Peaks, it's one of those things where I'm super excited for it to come back, but then I'm also worried that it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
Because, like another piece of news is that there's been discussion about the X-Files. They've said that it's likely to return, but it'll be for the 2017 to 18 TV season and not for the 2016 to 17, just because everyone involved with it's so busy. And, I don't know, like I really liked one episode of season 10, kind of like two others, and just did not care much for the Chris Carter episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like he's going to be the one who's the creative force on all this stuff. So I don't know how many more episodes I want.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I'll watch it, but, I wish they'd gotten like Vince Gilligan to come back.
Yes.
Because he would have brought something to it. I mean, Darren Morgan's episode, the Mulder and Scully Meet the Were Monster, I thought was a great episode, but his episodes have always been the kind of standalone Monster of the Week, more comedic episodes. So you really can't structure an entire the revival season on episodes like that. You kind of need to have like the big arcs.
Yeah, and it was great to have that contrast, because after even though the pilot episode wasn't the greatest, it set some things up in the series, some at least somewhat interesting things, and the middle of that season, the revival season, kind of got away from that, which was fine. I had those standalones, and I loved some of those, but I was almost ready for that story to wrap up because I was at least interested in some of the ideals that it was presenting.
Yeah.
So I love the mixture and balance of going back and forth, but I really hope that I wished it was. I hope this season's a few episodes longer. That way they can kind of weave in a bigger story in between those kind of standalone episodes more fluidly.
Or
go ahead.
At least the thing they used to do in the series a lot is you have standalones, which you weave in elements of the overarching story. So if you have 6 episodes and 3 of them are standalone, and 3 are the mythology arc, you could still filter those elements in through the 3. In this, it felt like all 3 were just kind of disconnected.
I mean, yeah, with the way that last season went, season 10, you could see the first episode of this new season picking right up where the other one left off, which was a very, there was a lot that happened there in that last episode. Life-threatening things for one of the characters.
For the entire world?
In the entire world. You could see that almost getting wrapped up in like an episode and then them going back. Just by the way season 10 was handled. Like, you feel like nothing really, there's no really real big stakes when it's handled like that last season was.
Yeah, you gotta let stuff simmer a little bit. You can't just jump from thing to thing and have more happen in 15 minutes. And then from a very small scale perspective, like only showing like a slice of how it affects like 3 or 4 people when there's this world changing event possibly happening. But yeah, so I'm excited for it to come back, but I really hope that they kind of take some constructive criticism from what people have said about season 10 and don't just do the same thing.
Yeah.
Let's see, kind of the last bit of news we'll talk about here. It's kind of funny because neither of us have watched this trailer. Is the trailer for Don't Breathe, the new movie from Fede Alvarez, who of course was the director of the Evil Dead reboot remake from a few years back. The trailer has hit the internet, and I have not watched it because a number of people on Twitter and social media had said, don't watch it. It gives away too much stuff from the film. So if you've watched it already, then I guess it's kind of a spoiler to know that it spoils the film, or maybe not. But this is a movie I'm really interested in watching, and I don't want to ruin it because a lot of trailers are ruining too many things.
Well, the bad part is this trailer will probably be in theaters depending on the release.
Right in front of...
Yeah.
Well, it comes out August 26th, so hopefully it won't be too hard to avoid, but it stars Jane Levy, Daniel Zavato, Dylan Minnette, and Stephen Lang. So Jane Levy was in the Evil Dead reboot remake. Dylan Minnette was in Goosebumps, and Stephen Lang was on Avatar or in Avatar.
What's
And-
that?
Avatar.
No, it's just funny because, the financial success of that film versus the cultural impact. It's like, I don't really remember. I remember the main actor and Sigourney Weaver from that film, and that was about it.
Yeah, there's been plenty of discussion about that on Reddit and other podcasts
Yeah.
on Avatar. So there'll be a bunch of them coming out. So we'll get to see
And it's
how it
produced by
rolls.
Ghost House Pictures, since he's working with Sam Raimi again, and Rob Tapert, which
Yes.
he previously did the Evil Dead remake.
Yeah, Don't Breathe, not Avatar.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so it's a movie that, I don't really want to find out too much about. I just know I want to see it. So that's something to keep an eye out for. So don't watch the trailer if you haven't already. Just wait till August to see the movie. So I think that kind of wraps up all the news because there really wasn't too much else that I wanted to talk about. And now we can move into discussion of what we've been watching recently. And I guess we can start with you, Sean. Have you watched much?
I feel like a kid who came to class without his homework because, one, I don't really remember much that I've watched. But I don't feel like I watched anything really horror related this past week because my wife and I, we started watching Game of Thrones and she enjoys that. So it's a good middle ground for us. So we've been watching like a lot of that and watched Silicon Valley. And I feel like that was about it because I also spent part of the week trying to watch that Cemetery Man and it messing up and going back and forth. And I watched like half of it or almost half of it where it was kind of messed up. And then I, got a better copy and I rewatched it from the beginning. So yeah, I think that was about all I did. Yeah, that's about all I watched and we started Game of Thrones, so we're like a season and a half in or something like that.
Yeah, so I've watched I watched Game of Thrones as it comes on. I've watched it from the beginning, so I read all the books. So this is the I think we mentioned before, like this new season is beyond the books on some of the stories, and they've continued to diverge further. So I'm into that. But the show that I actually probably look forward to seeing more every week now is Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Because if you have any interest in technology or that world at all, like the actual just Silicon Valley world, or just good nerdy humor, that show has it in spades. And all the jokes are so layered, and they set things up so perfectly, and they subvert your expectations on a lot of things. And
they weave. I was talking to my wife about this. They weave drama in so well. It's one of those shows where you can see where maybe a goal is set for the characters, and maybe a season long arc or a couple episodes. And once they get to that goal, it'll change things up in an interesting way, and then it sets the goalpost even further, or it moves it completely in a different direction. And they do such a great job of kind of layering the drama. It keeps it light. It's a comedy, but at the same time, just they set up some really interesting situations, for the characters, that you see a lot of shows. I mean, the one thing that jumped to mind was everybody's complaint about the American version of The Office when Jim and Pam get together.
Yeah.
That it lost a lot of that drama or, will they, won't they? Where this show kind of, it doesn't rely on any type of relationships like that too much, but you could see that happening to another show like this. Like, oh, well, they got their, the tech company startup, they landed some deal and now everything's fine. And now they're just in a workplace and there's there's little drama here and there, but no, there's always huge, major hurdles for them to face. And there's always something new. And the writing in it is just so good as far as that stuff goes, let alone the humor and the jokes. I mean, just it's phenomenal comedy TV writing. I mean, some of the best, probably the best comedy television show on TV right now.
And of course, the showrunner is Mike Judge, who was behind plenty of things that you may have heard of before. The movie Office Space kind of comes to mind, kind of making a comedy or satire of the work world. But of course, he was
Beavis and Butthead,
King of the Hill, and plenty of other things. Idiocracy, which is a movie that was kind of underrated at its time, but seemed to be kind of like a cultural touch point.
Yeah.
And even more relevant today with the way some things are going. But
yeah. And did you ever see Extract?
No, I've not seen that.
That was good. I went to theaters to see that. That was actually really funny. I think that was more of a Idiocracy kind of, that was a very interesting idea. And yeah, it wasn't a complete home run, but it's still super enjoyable. But Extract was more of a honed film where it's not as big of an idea, but it was just like a nice little comedy. I definitely recommend checking that out as well. That was very good.
Yeah, so if you enjoy laughter, check out Silicon Valley if you haven't already. It's an hilarious show. Mm-hmm. But one thing I watched that wasn't quite so hilarious this week is I worked from home one day and I had some other stuff going on where I needed to do some work around the house. And I just needed to throw something on the background of the TV. So I started watching American Horror Story Freak Show because I had not watched season 4 yet because I'd seen all the other seasons. And like I mentioned before we record the podcast, if you've ever seen the movie Freaks, which is the 1932 movie directed by Todd Browning that was about circus sideshow freaks, and I guess I really don't. It doesn't matter if I spoil that movie, but the trapeze artist, who's an attractive woman, decides to marry the leader of the performers, who is a little person, and that's like, if you ever heard like one of us, and everybody like chanting that, that's a reference to that movie. And there's some other kind of iconic scenes. And it seems like somebody thought they were really clever on Freak Show that they layered in a couple of like scenes kind of lifted directly from that movie. And it's just one of those things, like the opening credits to American Horror Story is always just gives off this vibe that's so much creepier than anything the show has ever done.
Yeah.
And that's every season, the credits. Because I think that show can maintain its illusion for like 1 or 2 episodes where stuff is interesting and mysterious and creepy. But once they get into it, it's all just about dramas, about makeshift families.
It just turns into a soap opera, a gothic soap opera.
Which, which is fine because Game of Thrones is just kind of a soap opera with a bunch of other elements sprinkled in.
Yeah.
But it's just,
But it just, for me, it almost seems a little goofy at times, like, but not intentionally.
Yeah, and then they do, like I said, it's kind of like it's always been like a makeshift family. And a lot of times it does the thing that annoys me where you're supposed to identify with these characters who are just kind of bad people. You're supposed to care about them, but you don't. And, the season Freak Show actually, had a lot of the main cast that have been in most of those seasons. But it also had like Michael Chiklis, who is usually great. But I thought here he was, good job, just kind of misused. And overall, I did not care for that. I thought that season was worse than the season 5, which I also didn't care much for. And yeah, so the show is going to continue on because it does well in the ratings.
Do you think the Todd Browning, the director of Freaks, is going to be mad if he sees this episode?
He
died in 1962.
Yeah, so he was born in 1880.
He was born in Louisville, Kentucky, so that's where we're based out of. He directed Dracula as well.
Yeah, I think the movie Freaks kind of killed his career because it was such a like he did stuff after that, but I remember reading like about that movie and that kind of put a stop to his career because it was such a out there movie for the time.
Yeah.
Because it has like people who are actual like circus performers. Because like one of the other iconic scenes is like a guy goes under kind of like a stagecoach thing trying to get away from him and they crawl under after him. And then there's one like the end scene where a character has like their limbs chopped off and is made to look like a chicken type of thing. So those scenes are both referenced in this show. Spoiler alert. It's just, and I don't think the Freak Show idea is a concept that really lasts for the entirety of a season. I think it kind of wore out its welcome pretty quickly. And like I said, for the new season, it hasn't really been revealed what the setting's going to be yet. But we'll have to see what they do. I know I'd heard like rumors of a summer camp, but there's some other stuff coming out that's summer camp. I think there's like a show on Chiller that's coming out, or one of those smaller networks that's about it, like a slasher at a summer camp. So they'll probably do some other genre and make a bunch of references to things, but do it poorly. So,
well, and that kind of makes me, thinking about Cemetery Man. I wonder how horror television is doing in like Italy. I wonder if that's a thing really, because in America it is, of course, but a lot of these horror shows are like a lot of the American horror cinema, where they're just kind of based on an idea and don't really take anything further than face value, or just kind of relying on a certain gimmick or trope or something, you know, kind of throughout the season.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
I would be interested to see if there's any good horror Italian TV right now.
yeah, I mean, because then you have a lot of horror on TV, and we've discussed all of it, but like American Horror Story, I really don't think even really gets mentioned much by people who actually are like hardcore horror fans. You don't really see it talked about all that much on the major horror sites, aside from when they have big news come out. But it seems like it doesn't get as much play as, you know, at least in the horror community, as something. Well, of course, like Ash vs. Evil Dead was popular because it was the return of a franchise that hadn't been in theaters since, you know, the early 90s. But it's a show that nobody I know really talks about, and nobody really seems that excited for, aside from some people in my work watch it who do not like horror stuff in general, but they like that show. So I think that's kind of who their audience is. And if people enjoy it, that's fine. Just to me, it loses all of its steam usually in the first few episodes, and then you're just treading water with these characters being portrayed by the same actors, just playing variations of what they've done before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but that was pretty much the only thing horror related I watched, aside from the various TV shows. So I think we can move into the discussion of Cemetery Man, which once again,
Delamore, right?
yeah, Delamore. And I looked it up while we were sitting here on Amazon. You can get the DVD for $62.99, and that's not exactly cheap. And the Blu-ray you can get for a little bit less, but it doesn't work on. It's $29.98, but it doesn't work on most Blu-ray players sold North America, Central America, South America, Japan, North Korea, South Korea. So not going to work for you in most players, but you can spend $60 on the DVD. So hopefully this movie gets, you know, like a Shout Factory or Scream Factory release with, you know, special features and a good Blu-ray transfer. Because the transfers that I have seen have not been great. But, you know, then again, this was shot in Italy. So I'd be interested to see, you know, do they still have, like, good film assets?
Well, I've seen some of the HD transfer, and it looked really good.
Okay, yeah. So I'd love to see that.
It kind of, for me, because I watched that DVD copy of Corey's a long time ago as well, and a little bit some this week. For me, it, like, kind of brought new life to it. And some of that film looks really, really good.
Yeah, because there's a lot of visuals there, too, that would look amazing. So
yeah, it does. Yeah. The transfer is pretty decent.
Well, I guess, too, I should just do the brief synopsis of what the movie is. It's pretty simple based on the title. A cemetery man must kill the dead a second time when they become zombies. So people they get put into the graves at the cemetery, and with 7 days, they come back, and he has to kill them again by shooting them in the head or destroying their head. And the main character is played by Rupert Everett, who has been in a few other things. He's Francesco Delamorte. And then his second in command is Nagi, who only says his name. And then, like, this is one of those movies where it might confuse some people watching it, because Anna Fulci plays multiple characters.
Yes, yeah.
And it's never explained. It's just like, oh, there's multiple characters.
Well, there's plenty of this film that's not explained too. The end of it gets a little, can be confusing if you kind of take it too literally. But at the same time, it's enjoyable on the face value as well.
Yeah, and two, like, this movie is described as a comedy, horror, fantasy type movie. So the comedy comes more in just the situational things than anything somebody is saying themselves. There's not like a bunch of quippy dialogue.
No.
It's just kind of these absurd situations.
Yes, yeah. Which is kind of for me, some of my favorite type of humor, because it doesn't, I guess, presume, you know, it's not characters presuming that they're funny. It is a situation, and if you find it funny, it's funny. If it's not, you know, it doesn't presume that you will kind of expect you to laugh at all these things happening.
And like I said, so the main character by Rupert Everett, Francisco Delamorte, And there's some stuff in this about impotency and some sexual stuff. Of course, there's a little bit of TNA in this, as you would expect from kind of a lower budget zombie film. But it's only a zombie film in so much that it's not your traditional zombie film. It's not Walking Dead or Dawn of the Dead remake or anything like that.
They're more of a nuisance, and therefore, again, it's kind of the situational elements for these characters.
Yeah, it's just they come back to life in this cemetery, and they have to be put down again.
One thing too about Rupert Everett, this was based on, I guess, a novel, which I had heard that, and his character, I guess, the look of his character is based on Dylan Dog, which was a comic book created by the guy who wrote the novel. And Dylan Dog, even though Rupert Everett doesn't play Dylan Dog, he's kind of dressed similar to him. But Dylan Dog was based on Rupert Everett. So, an actor was the basis of a comic book character, and then he goes on to play a character in a film that is somewhat based on that. So it's kind of this weird circle. It almost makes me think of the Nathan Fillion when people wanted him to play Nathan Drake. Not that they said he was based on that, but when Uncharted, the video game, came out, you kind of got that Nathan Fillion vibe from him. It was almost kind of the same thing here. And originally what I read too is some American company was going to finance this film if Matt Dillon was going to be the star. But I could see that going. It's one thing like, if Matt Dillon would have been in it, we would have a possibly, an American transfer. Who knows what it would have done for this film. But at the same time, along with Matt Dillon, I'm sure they probably would have had their hand in a lot of the creative side of it as well. Yeah. And it probably would not have been the film that it is. Been
more watered down.
Yes, yeah.
And then, so then they made a movie based on the Dylan Dog comic series, Dylan Dog Dead of Night. This starred Brandon Ruth as Dylan. And he was not Rupert Everett.
Yeah, the reviews for that were not... I was looking forward to that when it was coming out and kind of paid attention to it. And then the reviews were so bad, I just never... went out of my way to see that.
Yeah, it's got an average user score on IMDb of 5.1 out of 10, so not the highest.
And I think Rotten Tomatoes might be like 8% or something.
Yeah, so back to Cemetery Man. This is, like you said, Corey had it on his top 5 underrated foreign zombie films because, this is much more in line with the type of thing that you see come out of, Italy and, that part of the world versus what you see in America a lot of times, because it's a much more reserved movie. Mostly takes place at one location. There are a few different places they go, and then it kind of has like a surrealist bent at the end when it kind of goes off the rails a little bit of being like a strict narrative that you can easily follow. But the comedy kind of comes out of that, and then the visuals in this, the effects are great. Yeah. There's a lot of good face explosions and other things.
Cars getting ran over, or heads getting ran over by buses. For me, it kind of feels like almost an Italian early Tim Burton film. Like I could see this being a story that Tim Burton would have been attracted to at that time. It definitely has just an original worldview and just kind of an awesome setup for these characters. In the cemetery.
Yeah, I mean, and the main performances, like we said, Rupert Everett was great. And then I'm going to butcher this completely because I don't know exactly how you pronounce it, but Francois Haji Lazaro was the guy that played Nagi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was great.
And he was a character that he has an odd relationship that goes on in this movie, to say the least. And it's just one of those things where this type of concept will probably never fly. Well, I don't know. Maybe you could make this type of movies an indie today, but you would not get a studio's backing to make this.
There was supposed to be a Cemetery Man 2, like maybe around 2011. They acted like it was going to shoot. Yeah. And I think with Rupert Everett, but so far there's no word on that.
Yeah, it's been discussed, but so what's funny is if you go on IMDb, like if you look at the plot keywords, so like the different words that are on here are cult film, insanity, male pubic hair, male frontal nudity, And I don't really remember much frontal nudity. I mean, there is a scene where he gets out of the shower, but
Yeah, and he's with a woman in a graveyard naked, but I don't remember any frontal stuff really for him.
that's keywords. But this movie, then it has some other kind of like odd little side plots with like the mayor. And
Yeah, I mean, it's very much like kind of a dark humor and kind of a slanted outlook on things. It seems like a small little town where, same thing with almost like Dead Alive. It's like a small town community feel where it's got everybody's like a character, almost like in Twin Peaks. Everybody has a personality to them. They're all pretty well written, and it seems like all the actors and actresses are on the same page. Everything just kind of fits together in this film, and it's not like one piece kind of doesn't fit or stands out. It's very much the film is very much a success, and it's an odd film, so it's like that's an achievement on its own.
And two, like a lot of the stuff I want to discuss would need to move into spoilers. I don't want to spoil this if you haven't seen it. Just the issue is if you haven't seen it, it's not exactly cheap to get a hold of.
But it definitely, for me, definitely recommend trying to, if you're into horror, if you're listening to this, you're probably really into horror, because I don't myself even listen to really any horror podcast on the regular, but chances are you've probably got a friend or know somebody maybe online that would sell you a copy if you're in any groups or anything like that. Definitely try to get a hold of a copy somehow.
Yeah, like on eBay, there's some of them that are a little bit cheaper, like around $20. But buyer beware on some of those to make sure it actually works.
Yeah.
But I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to spoil anything. It's just, I think this movie's it's got kind of an absurdist bent to it. And that's kind of where the comedy comes from. It's not really like Evil Dead so much, like Evil Dead 2, where it's more overt comedy. This is more of just like all these things are happening, and then the reaction from other people isn't what you would expect, or it is, or it isn't. And then there's just kind of the absurd nature of what's happening. And it's got great effects, and all the performances are good. If you're looking for sexual content, there is definitely some of that in this.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing that's too super graphic, but this isn't something for children at all.
Yeah. Very beautiful actress that is prominently displayed in the film. She was in a movie called Pirates Blood Brothers from '99, and at first I thought it was that infamous Pirates like the first HD porn film, because the cover kind of looks like that one. I mean, that was going around at the time like as news, like, oh, it's the first HD porn.
I think I was at somebody's house when they turned that on. It's like, oh, that is people dressed as pirates.
And I was working at FedEx. My I had a HD camera. It was like one of the early Sony ones, and my uncle, he worked there. He got me a job there as well. And I was talking about the camera, and he's like, man, you know what you ought to do? He said, make an HD porn. I don't think anybody's ever done that. I'm like, actually, there's one called Pirates. They've already beat me to it.
Yeah, beat to the punch.
Yeah. No, but, this film, too. So the first time I watched it, it was several years back when Corey let me. I don't think I probably just watched it at his house, or he'd let me borrow one. And I really liked the film, and I never forgot it. That's what I think he brought it up, us watching on the podcast, and I was like, yeah, I was all for that, because I've been wanting to watch it again. And I kind of, the ending is a bit, toward the last part of it it kind of takes a different feel. Like it's all a little surreal and kind of weird, but the end of it is very almost ambiguous. But there's definitely more to it. And, but I don't say I took it at face value, because I knew there was something more there, but I kind of just enjoyed the ride the first time too. And this time, after watching it again, I was very much like, oh, I want to understand kind of what this is about. And there's some, I'll kind of dig into it when we get into the spoiler section, but there's some interesting, I guess, speculative analysis on the film that kind of makes sense, but there's just so much there based on even the final moments of the film. There's just so much more there than you kind of maybe were expecting at face value. And the film kind of does a nice progression from starting out pretty absurd and then just continuing to grow and kind of layer itself and not just be one note. It's not just about a film, a guy in a cemetery who has to kill people that are coming back to life. It's, you would expect lesser films to just be that, and they would probably be pretty decent. I could see some film like that just having a cult following on its own if they were, did it just well, just played it straight. But this goes way beyond that and presents some really interesting ideas and kind of a lot of things to think about as well.
Yeah. So like I said, I think, this is something that you should definitely search out and try to watch. But I think we can move into spoilers here after we get some plugs in. So if you want to help us out, if you enjoyed the podcast, make sure you're going to iTunes and leave a review so that everyone else can know what to expect from the podcast. And if you're watching in YouTube or anywhere, you can always send us any questions or comments you have at podcasts@housebythevideostore.com. You can find all the work we're doing at housebythevideostore.com and find links there to all of our social media accounts, which Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Vine, YouTube, Vimeo, everything could be found from there. And you can find me on the internet specifically at Will_Droid.
And I'm at Blevins Sean.
And also, if you want to help us out, you can go to our Patreon. It's patreon.com/HBTVS. And that just, if you become a Patreon, I think we have some pictures on there that are exclusive from the short film we worked on. So you can see some behind the scenes stuff we haven't released elsewhere.
And a video clip of an effect's gone wrong as well.
Yeah. And that'll be the first place we let people watch the short film before we push it out to the wider world, whenever that will be. But you can do that to help us out as we get more into making original content and trying to get a hold, some of these movies we want to watch, you got to go out and buy copies of it to be able to watch. So, that just kind of helps us not to spend everything out of pocket, but, we will continue to do that regardless, just to get the actual movies and to, see things in theaters and everything like that. But I guess now we can move into spoilers for Cemetery Man. And so what is your theory on what happens at the end there?
Honestly, I probably jumped too quickly into checking it online just because I had refinished this like right before we did the podcast, and I'd kind of remembered what it was previously, but the first time I watched it, I think I watched a couple films around that time, and it's one of those things where I really enjoyed it, and then I watched a few other films and kind of forgot about the ending and didn't think about it as much. So for a refresher, hopefully you have seen the film. I definitely recommend checking it out because you won't get much from this without it. But so at the end of the film, sorry, I've already forgotten all the characters' names. Nagi and Rupert Everett. What's his name? Yeah, Francisco de la Muerte. So he basically, after a lot of people die, they basically kind of escape. They try to get out of town and essentially away from death. And they're driving through a tunnel. They almost go off a cliff at the end of the road. And De La Muerte, he slams on the brakes, and Nagi kind of hits his head. So he gets out, and it's almost like a Silent Hill type situation where the road just ends. It's like a cliff. And he thinks Nagi might be dead, so he's about to shoot him, and Nagi wakes up. And then Nagi throws the gun off the cliff. And in my mind, I was thinking, oh, this is them kind of, getting rid of kind of this device of death, because it's caused a lot of death throughout it. And this film definitely is centered around death and not just zombies. It's not just like, oh, this is a reason. It's very much about death and these different characters dying off and coming back, and how people deal with it, even though it is in kind of a lighter manner and a lot of dark humor. But then they kind of switch roles almost, where Nagi speaks like a regular person, and De La Muerte he kind of mumbles something. Yeah. So it's very much like, oh, well, obviously there's some significance to this. And before, I never really kind of put too much more together besides that. And kind of same thing this time too. But Do you have any theories before I read kind of some things I found online?
Not really. I mean, you just see that the funniest part's probably when he's in the hospital and starts killing people.
Yeah.
And then as he's leaving, he sees like the inspector, the cop, or the detective, and he's like, "Oh, it's good you got a gun, so you can defend yourself."
Yes, after he just murdered like 4 people, and they're literally just walking in, getting killed by him. It's such a, I mean, it's a dark humor moment in that hospital room, and it's also very surreal and almost a comic book style framing in reality, because it pulls out to this hospital bed, and it's just blackness all around, aside from the dividers around it. And that shot very much looked like that would be straight out of a comic book or something. But it's definitely a more surreal moment. So there was one person who, Keith81 on IMDb, he said he took 2 people's opinions, Flooding Voice and Monteverde's. He kind of took their opinions and theories about the film and combined them. But the first guy who was, sorry, let me find this. Well, now I can't find the one that I was looking for. But one of them brings up the point that the lines are continually used, like "I'm in a dream," "This is a dream," and things like that throughout the film. So this combined theory by Keith81 from a couple other members says that basically there's a man named Franco, and he used to be an engineer. His family matters weren't going well, so he cheated on his wife with a hooker and fell in love with her. He couldn't comprehend why she didn't reciprocate his love, and he killed her, and out of jealousy, I guess, because she didn't love her and the clients, and then murdered, and then went on a killing spree, and I think murdered his family. And now he's in a hospital in a coma after attempted suicide, and his mind tries to work out death and love. So I guess the theory is that the main character is actually the one in a coma at the end, and he's kind of in this, I don't want to say purgatory, because I don't know if he's in a real place, but he's in this place in his mind, which is where the movie starts out, Rupert Everett's character, and he is dealing with death because people are coming back and there's love coming in and out of his life. So basically, De La Morte is his dark side, who is the murderer. He kind of murders some people at the end of the film, and Nagi is his good side, and kind of he's the one that loves the sunshine, and Franco doesn't like that. He thinks that's when weather's been bad. And so basically it's these two, I guess, parts of his mind and his ideals struggling with each other. And there's some kind of a little bit more detail on here, but basically the switch happens at the end when Nagi kind of wins. The good side wins, and he throws the gun. And that's when De La Morte kind of reverts to the lesser one, and kind of is mumbling like Nagi was before that.
Yeah. It's an interesting theory there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, some of it works out, and I would be interesting. This is kind of based on a novel. I don't know how loosely it was, but I couldn't find out much info about a novel synopsis or anything like that. But it definitely brings up a lot of questions, the end of this film and kind of the entire film. And a lot of people kind of go for that, oh, it's all a dream, or it's in this one character's mind. But there's also some evidence to that in this theory, at least. And even if it doesn't go all the way, and maybe some of the things don't work out, I think there's definitely room for this interpretation, if there isn't a one defined vision of what actually happened in this by the writers and director.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way, as presented, it's left pretty open as to what exactly happened. And, like the theory that you say, like, I think that sounds about as good anything I could imagine, aside from, you could almost get the ending like, what was that TV series that was all in a autistic boy's snow globe?
What was that?
Saint Elsewhere, is that
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Or like, I don't want to spoil other movies, but So it could almost even be something like that, really, with the way it ended with them being kind of stuck in this town or the road just ends. But, there's plenty of ways to interpret all this stuff. And, what about the Grim Reaper ghost that's in there in kind of the middle of the movie? It tells him to start killing the living. I mean,
yes, yeah. Yeah, there was, I'm kind of mad that I can't find the original. So this guy combined two opinions. I couldn't find the original one I was kind of holding up because I think he brings up a lot of the support for the kind of dream scenario or the it all being in his mind. And I think some people were kind of bringing up some other counterpoints to it, and they were kind of going back and forth. And I can't remember what he said about that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of layers to this film, but again, it's also enjoyable, like at face value, and to me, that's a really successful film. And it was just Friday the 13th, but this film just has so much more going on it than your average, like say slasher film.
Yeah. There's a lot going on there. Like you said, it's still enjoyable on a surface level. It's, a zombie film. So some people might be upset that it doesn't have a ton of, Romero-esque zombies getting mowed down and, large numbers by people with, firearms. Not that those movies are all about that, but, people might expect it to be, like Walking Dead or something. It's like, well, it's not that at all. It's just zombies are kind of a small piece of the backdrop and show up, more as a nuisance really than anything.
Yeah.
Aside from
which makes it funny. Which makes it funny. It's part of his job.
When the one comes out of the ground on the motorcycle and rides around,
yeah,
pretty awesome. And
then the Boy Scouts are coming in, and then when he's fighting them underneath the house where Nagi lives, and Nagi's just like eating his food and doesn't realize until he accidentally shoots the TV, and then he's more upset that he busted Nagi's TV because he knows how much that means to him, rather than he almost got killed. It's just. It has a great sense of humor and tone about it, and I feel like some of the humor maybe would have been, and I don't want to say for sure, but if Matt Dillon would have been in here, and not because of Matt Dillon, but because of maybe some more American investors, this is not an American film. It's apparent from watching that, even if you, even if you knew nothing and never seen any foreign films or kind of picked up on some of the obvious Italian trademarks in this film, you could see it going, one, the humor being more broad, and two, getting rid of some of the symbolism and maybe changing up the ending where, they just drive off, and kind of not having so much of the death stuff, or you could very much see this being watered down, and it's so great that it is what it is, and it was allowed to be the film that it is.
So I think that kind of covers all the stuff we wanted to talk about with this movie. So unless there's anything else, I think we can bring this episode to a close.
Yep. So maybe we need to write Scream Factory or Arrow Video and get them to figure out how to get this film released in the U.S. But definitely more people need to see it. And if you got a copy, pass it around to your friends.
Yep. So that'll bring this episode of the House by Video Store podcast to a close. Thanks for listening.
House by the Video